Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly O'Horo, and this is Adaptable Behavior Explained. Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly O'Horo, and I'm your host of Adaptable. And today we're going to talk about something that comes up in just about every single session as a trauma therapist. And it's really sweet and tender, and it's powerful, and it's deeply human, and it impacts all of us, especially if we are someone who's had really anything traumatic happen to us in our childhood. And so today we're going to talk about inner healing and reconnecting with the parts of ourselves that had to grow up too fast or shut down or carry burdens that they were never meant to carry at the age they started carrying them. So if you've ever found yourself reacting bigger than a situation needs, or getting stuck in old patterns, or feeling like a part of you takes over in certain moments, you're not broken. You're experiencing what Janina Fisher calls fragmented parts of self. They're young, they're protective, they're adaptive pieces of us that formed during painful and overwhelming experiences. As a trauma therapist, there are some go-to supporters when it comes to the language of parts work and inner child work. And Dick Schwartz is one of the all-time favorites. He wrote a book called No Bad Parts that is really a trauma therapist's favorite because it talks about how every part of us has good intention, even if its strategies are outdated, messy, or confusing, or no longer useful. So today we're going to talk about why inner child and parts work is so healing and important, and how to catch up and connect up younger parts of ourselves that got stuck in trauma time. I always tell therapists when I'm teaching that PTSD or trauma is a time orientation issue. We got stuck at the time developmentally, emotionally, and socially at the age of the thing that happened. And so we're going to learn how to speak with our parts using compassion and patience, curiosity, and openness. Now, that can be challenging, especially if when one of our parts takes over and does things that are not in the service of our highest adult self. But what happens when we shame or dismiss or judge our parts and how to repair that, what happens is not great. And so we're going to teach you how to repair that. And finally, I'm going to give you some gentle things you can use today to deepen your relationship with your inner child and your inner world. So let's get to it. There's a lot of information on inner child work, but not so much that's written by someone who's a specialist in this topic. And so hopefully you'll have both some grounded evidence from anecdotally years of experience that I've been doing this, but also from some of the greats that we pull our ideas from as therapists. So let's branch out here. Everybody has parts of self. Now, not everybody is pathologically dissociative, but most of us have a part that says, I want to go to bed and I want to stay up and finish this movie. They can be more dramatic and they can hold our fear, our sadness, our anger, or perfectionism, our people-pleasing, our shutdown, our drive. And as we talk about when I teach therapists, especially when I teach EMDR therapy, trauma freezes experiences in time, like I said. So when something overwhelming happens, one part of us keeps moving forward into adulthood while another part gets stuck in the age, the emotion, and the moment of that original wound. Janina Fisher talks about basically these parts aren't pathological, they're just wounded. They are stuck in trauma time with an injury. And Dick Schwartz, he talks about this really, that if we don't teach how to love and have compassion for all of our parts instead of shame and dismiss, they just get noisier. So parts only need care and attention and unburdening so that they can heal and become seen and known with today's highest self. So let me give you some examples. Let's say there's a 7-year-old part of you. You had an experience where you were yelled at and shamed and maybe highly criticized. And now when you're yelled at or when someone has disapproval or disappointment in you, there's panic that happens in adulthood during conflict. And so maybe you get small, or you don't stand up for yourself, or you don't know how to be assertive because you kind of revert back to like 7, and you sense that you feel really young in conflict. Or maybe you were a teenager and you felt unseen and dismissed and got really good at finding yourself in rooms by yourself because you didn't want to be around the conflict, or maybe you just didn't want to be the problem. And so instead of being assertive in that moment, maybe you shut down when you feel ignored or unseen. Maybe there's a part of you that had to become the strong one, that you didn't have grown-ups around you that knew how to adult well, or they shut down, or they were depressed, or they were always gone at work. And so now you have a part that's got to be strong and has to know how to figure everything out. And that part never lets you rest, even when you're exhausted. I'm sure by this point you've identified with some of these adaptations that happen during trauma. And these parts aren't trying to sabotage you. They have a job to do. When I explain this to clients, what I'll often say is our human system is like the body or the car. And whoever ends up in charge of ourselves is like driving the car. And so what we want to understand is when I have a 7-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old driving the adult that is me, it's not in my best interest. So, but they are looking out for you even if it's unhelpful, because their goal is to protect you, and they're doing that the only way that they know how. And so how do we solve for this? What do we do? Basically, the whole goal is to catch up and connect up younger parts of ourselves into highest self in today's person who knows better, who can come up with better solutions, and who is not stuck in trauma time. So when we do this inner child work, we really want not to abandon or burden or dismiss these parts. We need to get curious. We need to understand. Because here's the thing, our adult self has wisdom. Our adult self has safety, independence, resources, and our brain can regulate us now. Our younger parts, when we were stuck in trauma time, those parts didn't know that. So they think it's still happening. They're stuck as if this experience that's triggered in today's life or the environment around us is still happening. They think you're still 5. They think you're still 12. And they don't realize that there's an adult here to handle it. They think they're still alone in the scenario. So our job in adult self is to help find them and update that file. Think of a computer that kind of needs defragged. It needs today's data. It needs to stop running on stuck. So let me give you some more examples. Let's say there's a 10-year-old part of you who learned we can't trust anyone. People are not able to be counted on. They need help catching up with the reality that is now. We can choose who gets to be close to us. We can give our trust in somebody that has earned that in small moments over time, which is how trust is built. Maybe we have a part that had to act like an adult at 6 because maybe there was an illness in the family, or maybe there was parents that were working, or maybe there was a one-parent home and they were just gone at work. And so the 6-year-old needs help connecting up with the real adult who can finally carry what that child once held all by his or herself. So when you catch them up, you help them discover the danger is over. They're not trapped anymore. They have choices. They have options. They're now safe. They can choose who to trust. And oftentimes, one of the things that gets stuck is they weren't responsible then, and they should not have been put in a position to be responsible then. So we can understand and let go of any judgment we had of self when we were young to recognize that, we really shouldn't have been put in some of the positions we were put in. And this isn't to badger or judge or dismiss parents. I believe most parents are really doing the very best they can with what they know. I believe in a generous assumption. But sometimes even when they were doing their best, it wasn't good enough. And so they put burdens or responsibilities on children that should not have been put on them. And so here's the key, and here's how we're going to solve for this. We're going to treat our parts with compassion, with patience, with curiosity, and with love. Our parts responded far better to compassion than criticism. If we are critical or shaming or dismissive, our parts kind of get noisy. They battle. They really try to take over more so. But when we see them and we hear them and we feel them, they kind of feel seen. So when we speak to our inner children with judgment and dismissal and harshness, or like shaming, like they just need to get over it. In fact, I once had a client tell me that a therapist of theirs in the past said, we just need to put that teenager who's naughty on a cloud and push her away. And I was so triggered because I thought, that's not how we do this. We can't just dismiss parts of us. They are how we became who we are, and they need to be loved and seen, even if those adaptations aren't, useful today. Because when we shame, those parts retreat, they shut down, or they fight harder. Why? Because they interpret your tone as the same danger they learned to fear as children, right? So let me say that again. The reason they shut down or the reason they get noisier is because they now are basically experiencing the same thing that got them started in the first place. So that's not going to help, right? So parts heal through relationship, and we have to offer our inner selves what wasn't there at the time. We have to show up now for our little parts in ways that didn't happen. So if you know how to be loving or compassionate, then we just bring that. When our higher selves lead with compassion, our parts start to settle down. They start to believe, maybe she's got it. Maybe I don't have to be so noisy. So your inner world responds to the way that you speak to it. Our interaction with our inner world must be compassionate to be successful. If you treat your parts like they're annoying children, they'll act like it. If you treat them like frightened, overworked protectors, they will soften. If we can see them with understanding and compassion, they feel like they have camaraderie with our highest self. And in that camaraderie, they can start to settle down. So most of us don't talk about ourselves very kindly. Most of us shame ourselves when we don't like how we're showing up. But when we meet our parts with shame or dismissal or irritation, they feel like we did as kids, maybe unseen, misunderstood, rejected, abandoned, and more protective than ever. They're like, see, it's not okay to settle down because look what we have to deal with. So this is why that internal conflict increases when we try to push away anxiety, numbness, self-sabotage, anger, tears, or shutdown. We can't do that. Those reactions are parts doing their best. They are trying to show up for us the best that they know how. And so we have to meet them differently than we were met when we were little. So let me give you some examples. Let's say you have an anxious part and you're so tired of being exhausted and overwhelmed from the anxiety. If you yell at that part or you shame or get angry, that part's going to get more anxious because now it's afraid of both the outside threat and the internal threat, okay? Or an angry part that gets louder because it feels ignored. Or an avoidant part retreats deeper because it feels unsafe to come forward. And so compassion is the antidote. Compassion is how you become the leader of your system and you meet with camaraderie your inner world. And this is what we're going to have to learn to do, especially if the voices that were outside of us, our external world, didn't give us an example. Now, I oftentimes will help a client with this by paralleling, how would you treat your child? Or if your child was talking like this about themselves, what would you say? But if you don't have children or younger people in your world where you can see the parallel that's more appropriate, this even works with pets. If you know how to be kind to your dog or your cat because they're just helpless and they don't know what to do and they rely on you, you can bring that energy, that compassion, that love, that understanding to your inner parts. So let me give you some examples if you're not familiar with what that can look like. Because some of us really didn't have any example, and maybe many of us have to watch movies or TV to even get an idea of what that could look like. So let's just start with like a fearful young part. So you might need to lean in and say, hey, sweetheart, hey, little one, I can feel that you're scared. Thank you for showing me what's still hurting and what was dangerous. I'm here now. You're not alone in this anymore. Oftentimes, our parts were alone at the time, and so they can't heal without relationship, and that doesn't require someone outside of you. It requires you to you. So let me give you some more dialogue for maybe a part that's more protective, like anger or avoidance or perfectionism, which a lot of people don't understand as armor, or withdrawal. So this is going to be understanding about overwork. So I see you working so hard to protect me. I know you're doing this because you care. I'm curious, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't do this? So what's the danger if you stopped getting so angry or so perfect or so avoidant? What would happen? What is the threat if that would happen? And so that's where the curiosity needs to show up, because this is how we're going to better learn what caused the need for this adaptation. And it takes some practice, and I know that this sounds so crazy, but it really is impactful. Now, the next the next adaptation is about shame, and shame is our most inhibitory emotion. It shuts us down. It is a full contact emotion, and it shuts us down more than anything. So we really have to be kind to parts that shame. So we need to start with things like, I'm not here to judge you. You've carried this pain for a long time. Thank you for surviving. You were so strong and so brave, and you really did the best that you could. That can help to soften and slow down a part that is full of shame and carries a lot of burden from shame, critical parents, or just a lot of abandonment or neglect. And then we might need to be more vague because we don't really understand what a part is doing. So for a part that we're not sure about yet, we might say something like, I noticed that you're here. I want to understand you. You don't have to change or go away. I'm just listening. And for those of you who are adults thinking about this, we don't want to, thinking about the metaphor I talked about before, where we're the car and whoever's driving the car is who's kind of taken over as one of our parts or our inner children. We want high self in charge as much as possible, which is our most adult version of our current age. And we would just like to invite our parts to sit shotgun or maybe in the back seat and let them know they can take the wheel if we need them to, but I've got it for now. My adult self has it for now. If we have an overwhelming part or an overwhelmed part, this is a part that might shut down or freeze, and we might say something like, this feels like a lot. I know. Can I sit with you? You don't have to carry this alone. Let me just be with you in this moment. So I know that it sounds funny. I really like the book Janina Fisher has, which is called Healing the Fragmented Parts of Self. And I recommend getting that if this is some work that you're doing, because in the back of that book, there are several different other activities like this that are really helpful. And these dialogues help us to activate our self energy, the calm, the confident, the compassionate parts of self, that inner leader that's our highest self. And that is how we can work with our inner parts. Dick Schwartz, who came up with IFS, Internal Family Systems, when we lead with self, he talks about when we do that, we have a lot more cooperation from our inner worlds. And that's what we're looking for. We're not looking to abandon. We're not looking to shame or shut down our younger parts. We're looking to help them understand their function. We want them to know that we see them, because every part of us has a story. Every part learned to help you survive. None of them are bad. None of them are wrong. None of them are beyond healing. They just might need an updated version of today's reality. And by catching up and connecting up our younger parts of self, we integrate the pieces that once felt more fragmented. We become more whole, more present, more tender, both with ourselves and with others. So hopefully you found this helpful. This is just a little snapshot. It takes practice. I recommend with my clients who have very active inner child parts that oftentimes take over and higher self doesn't get to be at the wheel as much as they would like, to start their day with some of this inner dialogue activities so that they can understand who feels present, and they can start with connection and understanding and compassion and partnership. And so again, don't give up. You can heal. Your younger parts deserve it, and you've got this. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you found this helpful, please subscribe. We've found that most of our listeners who are watch hours, especially on YouTube, are not subscribers of our channel. So please give us a subscribe or a like. If you find this helpful for someone that you might know, go ahead and share it. We love that. And until we meet again, don't forget to lead with love. It'll never steer you wrong.